that I think hopefully you guys get a lot out of. I think we're going to kind of talk through some topics here at the top and go through some questions from you guys at the bottom. But quickly, some intros. So I'll kind of go down the line here. Brian Gordon, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Media at the USOC. Brent Bennett, video producer at BuzzFeed. Lindsay Signor, who is the Senior Director of Consumer Engagement at NBC Sports Group. And Troy Iwan-China, got it right? Yeah.
Pretty good.
VP of Digital at the NBC Sports Group. And so we're talking about, a lot of Rio 2016, but we're also going to talk a little bit looking ahead to 2018. And I think one of the most fascinating parts of this group in talking with you guys was just what it actually means to be partners. So I figured it would actually be a good start to kind of go down the line and hear from each of you really what it means for the USOC to work with NBC and with BuzzFeed, for NBC to work with BuzzFeed in the USOC. So Brian, maybe you could start us off there.
Sure, thanks, Lou, and thanks you guys for joining. So NBC is one of our largest, if not the largest sponsor of Team USA. So it is a sponsorship / true partnership. I think one of the greatest examples that we have with between NBC and the USOC is in the digital side is called Gold Map. It's a program where NBC uses their broadcast, obviously during the games, everybody's watching, and they promote and drive people to a website. It's called Gold Map. And then users are able to click through to our national governing bodies and find out more information on how to sign up for sports. What that does is the success of Team USA directly correlates to the success of NBC. We need to win gold medals. So what this Gold Map does is promote athlete recruitment for parents and for children who are watching the games, and there's no better platform to do that than during the Olympic Games. And we've seen everywhere from 200 to 300 people a day who want to sign up for bobsled. Yeah. Who, it's not a sport that somebody would normally be interested in, but now they see this ad and this promotion that NBC did, and it directly affects that participation. So that shows you what kind of partners we are.
And for BuzzFeed, working with NBC and getting access to the content and being able to work with the Olympics and making videos, we were primarily working on a Discover Snapchat channel, which ran for the duration. Which was making like 20 pieces of content every day. Sent a team of about 12 producers down there, and we're able to just lean on the massive, awesome group that you guys had down there, and make content that for platforms that BuzzFeed is really excels at.
Yeah, and I think on the consumer engagement side, which sort of encompasses marketing, social media, all of that, the Olympics is a massive event. And for us, we really want to make sure we reach as many people as possible. And it would be naive to think we can only do that by keeping everything within the NBC Olympics footprint. So by partnering with Team USA, with BuzzFeed, and with other partners, we really try to hit every single person in the country with some kind of Olympic content. And especially when it comes to our friends at BuzzFeed, they 100% have aggregated an audience that the NBC Olympic side hasn't. And so I think trying to do that in an authentic way and targeting their audience as well really helps us. And then as it pertains to our Discover channel, it was branded NBC Olympics. But again, we'd be naive to say we know exactly what a Discover channel has to make it successful. We had not done one before. And so BuzzFeed is the best in the business at engaging people on that platform. And so we wanted to work with them to really customize content there instead of going in it alone.
Troy, anything?
Yeah, just echoing what Lindsay said. I think in a nutshell, we at NBC Sports Group have the privilege of covering the Olympics up until 2032. And the world is changing, arguably faster than ever. We're very, very happy to have partners like this who can help us because we don't have all the answers. And it's fantastic to be able to tell stories, to be able to look at different ways of producing and distributing content. And we're naive to think that we have all those answers within our own walls. So great partners like this are critical.
Well, before we look ahead too much, though, I want to look back on Rio in 2016. So, as was said in the intro, the most streamed event in history, not just the Olympics, so keep that in mind. And so, Troy, I think this is really kind of directed at you from a perspective. 6,700 hours of programming across the digital platforms of NBC Universal, 2,084 linear sort of broadcast hours across the broadcast networks. Like, how do you pull that off? That's a lot of content.
A lot of research planning, great difficulty in pulling it off, but it starts at the top, and I think from a leadership perspective, one thing that I've seen in the 3 different Olympics that I've been a part of is really embracing that change, talking about how the world is a lot different now. In terms of a measuring stick, I think it's great to pat yourself on the back and say, look at all this consumption. But when we look internally, what we did with Rio is more than the 3 previous games combined in terms of digital consumption and live streaming. So the world is changing and shifting towards more and more streaming. So we've built up the infrastructure. It's a lot of people, partnerships like we've talked about as well. And just the mindset of understanding that we need to move with the world and the people as the consumption habits are changing as well.
I took the notes, 3.3 billion total streaming minutes, 2.7 billion live streaming minutes, and 100 million unique views. That's pretty awesome.
It is. And one other thing is that a large part, call it 90% or so of that live streaming audience is a younger demo, 35 and under, which is a nice talking point as well.
Yeah, definitely. So transitioning a little bit off of streaming into the other sort of avenue, I think, which is of most importance here is social. And I think, Brian, in talking with you a little bit, it'd be interesting to hear, when you guys approach these games, what is the USOC's goals when it comes to getting the athlete stories out there, getting the event coverage out there? What do you guys approach each of these Olympics with? And
So we have, speaking of partnerships, we have a big shoot that we do with NBC in West Hollywood that is usually about 9 months before the games, where we bring 100 athletes through every day. And we use that one from a social standpoint to get our video and our biographical content. That's where you see also the great promotion that NBC does with all the artistic, across all platforms. BuzzFeed is there because they have so many people to service with Comcast. Then coming up in September, we have our media summit, and we bring those athletes back through again, and that for us is strictly social. So what we do is, as we bring the athletes through, that's where we want our gifts, that's where we want all the engaging content, whether it's the signs, the donation, the fun things to react to build to what these guys are showing. That's how we approach the games. The third thing that we do is we promote what's happening. As you were talking about streaming and how successful Rio is, that infrastructure and what they did is even that much more important for these upcoming games, because I looked at the schedule the other day. There are no events in the United States between 8:30 in the morning Eastern and I think 5:30 in the afternoon or 6:30. Yeah. So there's a full day where there's nothing happening, where people are used to watching the Olympics. So that streaming, once the games start, is going to be that much more important. And that makes it much more important for us to be able to promote and drive people to the broadcasts, drive people to all the streams. And the other thing that it does, honestly, on the social side is once we know what's going to be on primetime that night, it gives us all day to prepare our best content. There isn't as much real time that we need because we know when the viewers are watching. And that night with that largest audience. So we spend, it goes back to our partnership at West Hollywood, and then at Media Summit, we have all of our content ready to go. We know that NBC is going to show gold medal figure skating that night, and hopefully Gracie Gold's at the top of the podium, and we have our 30 Gracie Gold clips that are ready to go.
It is kind of incredible to think about the work that you do 9 months prior to the games. Really is that kind of lead into the beautiful stuff that you see kind of coming out during the actual Olympics. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, and that's one thing that we just try to tell our team is the preparation that goes into this for us is as important and on a day-to-day basis as it is, we see it as our athletes. We're doing something every day to see if it's going to work or not.
because we have so many competitions and so many athletes competing and so many athletes training, that we can, you test it on the fly to make sure that it is going to work and it is going to resonate.
Sure. Lindsay, pivot to you a little bit, and I know we're looking way back here, but compare 2014, if you can, a little bit to 2016. I know one of the big goals, talking with you last year, going in was Facebook Live was one of your big things.
Yep.
I think you did 190 different Facebook Live chats throughout the course of the games.
We did a fair amount. Mm-hmm.
With a very small team, too.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about, as you guys looked at 2016, without that time shift issue that we're talking about for 2018, what was your approach and strategy, and then kind of dovetail into how BuzzFeed became a part of that, too?
Yeah, so I think we were really excited about just an hour time change on the East Coast for Rio. It had been, we haven't had that as an Olympic sort of time frame in a long time. And so we've always historically had this padding that's a little bit like PyeongChang, but not quite as dramatic, where we have time to turn things around. We had a ton of live coverage in Prime, which a lot of people in the past had complained about. And I think we really were, when you run a social team, real time is sort of the crux of what you generally base your strategy on. And so this was a little bit more traditional than we've done in the past. With all that being said, we had a ton on in prime time. We had other things going on NBCSN. We had a ton of other sports that were streaming. And so for us, it was really trying to look at all of it holistically and get to the people that wanted specific things, what they wanted. And so primetime generally is a much broader audience. Same kinds of things that Brian was saying, Michael Phelps is swimming, it's a big deal. If it's his last race, it's a huge deal. We had 18 different ways on different platforms on how to remind people, you don't want to miss this might be his last race ever. At the same time, a lot of what we worked through in terms of our strategy was distribution. So USA Archery, for example, on their social platforms, they have aggregated diehard archery fans. The broad audience that we have created over the years may not care as much about archery, but we don't want to leave that out. And so we had a whole system in place in Stanford where anything and everything that was being cut on the site, articles, video, whatever it was, we had one person in charge of just getting that to every single person possible. What could we get to the Today Show that might be a little bit kind of focused for their audience? What were we doing on our own? So for us, it was months of organization, having the right amount of people in place too. The Olympics is a huge event. You don't really want to skimp on resources. And then also when we were in Rio, what are the things that are actually on the grounds that make sense for us? We work with a lot of the athletes. Facebook Live was our big focus for the athletes because the time change allowed us to be able to put the athletes in front of people when they were actually awake. For PyeongChang, that's not going to be the case. So we have to completely shift our strategy when we have access to the athletes at 4 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast. What do we want to do there that people will actually engage with it, assuming you're probably not awake? And so I think a lot of it had to do with just planning and making sure we got the right content to the right people. And we have 2 weeks to get it right. So we really didn't hold anything back. I think we were looking at data in real time, but honestly, a lot of it is looking back to see, what do we think worked, what didn't work. And what we've learned over the last few Olympics is people can't get enough Olympic content. And so we really just wanted to make sure we serve them on every platform and customize it the way each platform presented. And that's definitely where BuzzFeed came in with us. We worked very closely with them on our Snapchat Discover channel, talked through the storylines in advance. If Michael Phelps is going to swim tonight, what are we going to do? If he wins, what do we want to do? And just being really nimble was a huge part. We were, next to each other in Rio and just constantly communicating on those storylines.
Yeah, and Snapchat, BuzzFeed was one of the first publishing companies to actually have its own Discover channel, and it's kind of its own beast. It takes a lot of thought and work to make content that performs and excels exclusively on that platform because it's a vertical frame and there's certain ways that the sharing is different. So while Lindsay was handling all of the social content on Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, we were really brought in to specialize on the Snapchat side One of the reasons why is like when you think of Facebook and you're sharing a video or an article, you're broadcasting it to a bunch of people. And on Snapchat, a lot of the times, if you're going to be sharing an article, a comic, a GIF with someone, it's a person-to-person share. And it's also very customizable. You can draw on it and write someone's name. For instance, one of the pieces we did was like gold medal for best sister, and it was a gold medal, and then you wrote whatever name you wanted to put in, and that was one of the like highest performing, most shared things that we did. And so just kind of continually making sure that all of our content that we were shooting with you guys was designed for Snapchat specifically.
I think I have the numbers here on that. 35 million viewers over 2 weeks on the Snapchat channel, 2.2 billion views. Like, again, some really incredible numbers. I did think it was fascinating talking to you as well before this about just that core idea of shooting for vertical, right? Which is very, I guess it's somewhat new. It's not that it was always frowned upon in many ways, right? To shoot vertical on your phones, and now, with this platform, it's become sort of the required.
Right, because it feels way more natural that way, and we're already holding our phones that way. And it was kind of cool that a lot of the in-game footage that we did do, like random posts and videos, luckily a lot of the content, swimming pools are vertical, so like they fit great in a vertical frame, or like when you're doing gymnastics on the pole, like. And think about ice skating, it's all vertical framing as well. So it actually fits pretty well on your phone.
It's really interesting. One of the other things, and this is again, I guess really for the two of you, I guess in partner with Brian, but it always blows my mind looking at this and how it seems like you guys are everywhere across the Olympics, right? And again, with somewhat small teams. So I think this is probably for the three of you, and I'll let you kind of figure out how you answer, but I think it's how do you determine what are those events that you need to be at, right? It's sort of that scheduling aspect to say, we need to be at swimming tonight because Phelps is swimming again, or we need to be at that archery event because we've got 3 Americans that are going for gold, right? So how do you guys, and how did you work together to sort of divide and conquer there a little bit?
I'll start from the Team USA side. Ironically enough, Sarah Higgins, who's sitting there, sorry to embarrass you, was part of our digital command center team in Colorado Springs. So we had 2 people on the ground in Rio, and that was it. And the rest of the people were in Colorado Springs. So we had a stand-up call every morning that was, here are the events, where do we want to send people. But I would say 90% of our content and the amplification of NBC's content came out of Colorado Springs. As I said, Sarah was part of that team. So we had I think it was 20-hour shift, Sarah, was that about what it was? Where we assigned specific people to specific events. For us, because we have to cover all events all the time, even if a Team USA athlete is going to finish 6th, which may not be at the top of your radar, it is on the live side, we want to make sure and tell that story. So we were very coordinated. We had a schedule done a month out, and then every day we just decided, here's where we need to put our weight.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it was really trying to divide and conquer a little bit. So we looked at all of the different assets that we had. So whether it be a highlight or a pre-produced piece of content, we kind of looked at each day, and we were about the same in terms of sort of that. There was maybe a few hours where we weren't on, but we had a group in Stamford, Connecticut, which was sort of our social command center. We also had a video team with the digital group. We had an editorial team, and then we had about 5 or 6 folks, not including BuzzFeed, in Rio. And we would have an editorial call every morning and break down, okay, what are the top storylines today? And so where I think we did a good job was it might be a really high-end graphic next to a highlight, next to an article, next to another highlight. And so as you're going through your newsfeed, for example, we're not trying to inundate you necessarily with content, but we are trying to make sure, if going back to that Phelps example, like if he's swimming that night in prime time, there's no excuse for us not to have told you 8 different ways on 8 different platforms, what that storyline is and why you can't miss it. In addition to that, we're pushing out, links to live streaming. And so I think for us, it's just sort of looking at what are the assets we have and then strategically rolling them out when it makes the most sense so that you don't feel like I don't want to go on Facebook anymore. I can't deal with all this Olympic stuff. but it's all different kind of formats and creative. And then with the people we deployed on the grounds, it was really what specifically about this needs to come from Rio. Because the highlights that we put out, I think we had over 630 million video views on Facebook. It did a lot of the storytelling for us, but there might be something, whether it's the culture in Rio or a warm-up that we weren't going to live stream, or the athletes after they were done competing doing stuff. And so I think for us, we didn't have 50 people out taking snaps of kind of the culture in Rio, because that's not necessarily the best performing stuff. It's really about the athletes. It's about the competition. And so to Brian's point, the bulk of what we were doing was coming out of either Stanford or Rio in sort of our office spaces there.
And one good thing that we did when we worked with NBC was they edit topical promos every night of what's coming up. And they sent those over to us so that we could distribute those on our channel natively, because we have a pretty big audience. As we're watching the games and going along, we figured we can't do a better job of promoting than they do, so let's share that content and push it out.
And I think it's a collective group. Like, we do this with a lot of our partners, our sports partners. For NASCAR this weekend, we are sort of the torch is passed from Fox to us, and we want to make sure, whether it be with NASCAR or the drivers or the teams, that it's one message. What are we trying to communicate to any fan, no matter where they are, about this race this weekend? And so we did a lot of that too, making sure we're coordinated on the storylines, definitely like the time and the channel, like that's super important. And so I think all of that too, like our promotion is coordinated, even if we have separate goals, it's all aligned.
And Brent, we dropped you into Rio without any experience, so how did that work out? You just kind of navigated yourself?
It was great. I forget who I heard this from, but Gary maybe said it. It's like when you're in the Olympics, it's really an adrenaline factory, and so like you're working just as hard to like try to make content, because those athletes are the best athletes in the world. So it just like gets you so excited to be everywhere and work those long hours to get all the content out, because we were making like 20 pieces of content that came out daily that we had to get. We had like deadlines to get all those out. And of course, leaning on NBC, who had a huge research team that would basically pinpoint exactly what athletes were probably going to medal and direct us that way. But also, our team of producers that we sent down were all what we call multi-hyphenates. So they're video producers who are shooting, editing, writing articles, and doing everything. One person's doing that. So I would be like in a room shooting with Michael Phelps, a Snapchat video where he was trying face filters for the first time. He hadn't ever done that. And then because I was there shooting, I already was editing in my head the video, which I could just like immediately, literally right after our 5 minutes with him, go sit down and start editing it to get out on the platform.
And Troy, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I was going to say just a little context to all the great work that these teams are doing in Rio. From an NBC Sports perspective, we have about 3,000 people that are working on the Olympics. A large portion in Rio, we had a couple thousand. We had 1,000 people back in Stanford operating and doing a lot of things that support what's going on in the field. Lindsay had mentioned we have what we call our highlights factory, which is roughly 100 people, and they're pumping out about 5,000 videos over the course of the 17 days. So just a tremendous amount of volume. And there's all the planning that we talk about and the strategy that goes into this, and then what ends up happening in many cases is that some of the best stories that come out are the ones that, of course, are unplanned. So in our case, this go around, coming out of the highlights factory, there are hundreds of feeds that are coming in every day, and someone just happened to spot a moment that was going on in the high jump. And it was Sam Kendrick.
Pole vault.
Did it say high jump?
Pole vault.
Pole vault, sorry. And he was practicing in the pole vault and was running and about to do his routine, and heard the national anthem, the U.S. anthem, being played in a different part of the field. And so he stopped right in his tracks, and that ended up being really the definitive moment that came out of our highlights factory. And it speaks to, you don't know what's going to happen. And in this case, it's really true to our brand and the stories and the emotions and the athletes that we really want to push those across. So.
Sure. I want to transition a little bit a little bit away from Rio, as we have about 15 minutes left here, and talk a little bit about looking ahead. So I think the first thing I would say before we get to 2018 is something that is really for you, Troy and Brian. It's the new Olympic channel. It's launching on July 15th. It's a partnership between the USOC and with the NBC. Maybe you guys can speak a little bit more to what that channel is meant to entail and sort of how that's going to help in telling these stories about the games that you're looking for. So,
I mean, for us at a high level, I touched on it already, so I'll keep talking about it.
yeah.
It's really embracing the Olympic story, the amateur athlete, the whole spirit of the partnership that we have with the IOC, with the USOC, and it's taking what is an event that happens every 2 years and making it part of your everyday calendar. Really, that's the way that we're going into it. And Brian, you might want to.
Yeah, and for us, it's, from a Team USA brand standpoint, we are a year-round brand, and now this gives us another channel. It is the Olympic channel, home of Team USA. It will be the linear channel as well as a digital platform, and it allows people to follow our athletes' journeys to the games. We have events this weekend that starts tonight. Actually, there's a swimming event, Team USA Summer Champion Series, presented by Comcast. It's the National Swimming Championships. That is an Olympic Channel, home of Team USA branded program. So you're seeing the swimmers who performed in Rio and also the ones who are going to who are on the road to Tokyo. So from our standpoint, we say every moment matters, and every moment matters for our athletes. Now we'll be able to document that, and NBC, who are the best at doing that, will be able to document that year-round on this platform.
Yeah. Troy, another part of that sports engine is a sort of youth-focused sort of initiative that you guys have started that I think kind of dovetails into this idea of it being a year-round mentality. Do you want to speak a little bit to how that plays into this whole game as well?
It's a great company. We recently acquired them. Probably the easiest example is if you're a parent and you have kids that play youth sports like ice hockey or soccer or whatever it may be, and you sign up, this is a tool, it's a technology that works with a lot of the different associations to make it easier for you to sign up and track your kids. And for us, it's fantastic. Everything from what does the calendar look like for practices this coming week to who's in charge of bringing the apple slices for after the games. We look at this as just another way of embracing that youth sports movement and how hopefully we'll be positioning future Olympics for all the way up to 2032 at least.
Lindsay, you have 6 months in about a month, I think it is, right? So 7 months today. You've got a busy week to start the month of February next year. So Super Bowl on NBC,
Yep.
followed by the opening ceremonies a long ways away from the Super Bowl. So
Yeah.
as we start to look ahead, talk a little bit about the opportunity that presents and the challenge at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny. The Olympics, every Olympics, you're like, wow, we just set the bar. And then the next one comes and you're like, man, that bar's like kind of seems really low now. And so this will be the first. We've had Super Bowls in the same year as an Olympics before, or not the same calendar year, but within 6 months. This is the first time, at least in my experience, where the Super Bowl Sunday is on Sunday, and we go on the air on Thursday, which is insane. And for us, the team that works on football and the Olympics is the same team. So we're definitely going to be borrowing people. I've already talked to some of my colleagues who oversee Premier League and NASCAR and others, and I'm like, we're taking your people. Hopefully that's okay. Personally, I'm flying directly from Minneapolis to South Korea. With the time change and everything, that gets me there like the day before our first day on the air. So I think resource-wise, it's something we're planning for. The Super Bowl is the biggest promotional opportunity ever. People are so willing to pay a boatload of money to advertise there, and I think it gives us the opportunity to elevate our next huge event after Super Bowl. So there's really no better way to get people excited about PyeongChang, but then to talk about it in the Super Bowl. So I think we're really excited about it. I think it is going to be crazy. But at the end of the day, like every Olympics, there's another curveball. This one's just massive, and we see it coming, which is helpful. Yeah, we actually we shot some stuff with some of the Olympians at West Hollywood talking about their super early Super Bowl picks, which they thought was ridiculous because it totally is. But we're going to try some things like that. We have a lot of NFL players that are super interested in Olympic sports, and so you'll see a lot of this cross-promotional stuff that we're thinking about now. But hopefully, you know what, I think it'll be a awesome 2018 for us if we can pull all of this stuff off. But I think there's no better way to launch the Olympics than a Super Bowl, 4 days earlier.
You can sleep in March, too. So
Yeah, sleep is overrated.
Brian, how do you make 2018 sort of bigger and better from the USOC perspective? What can we expect from you guys?
People like to use the word optimize, and that's really what we're trying to do. I think for us, it's looking at what athletes socially, because that's really the space where we play. We can't play in the broadcast, and we don't want to. That's NBC space. So we're looking at those the athletes that we know that perform socially. We've already gathered a group that we know is going to perform well, and we're going to track their road starting from now until PyeongChang is proper pronunciation. But we're looking to optimize, and what we want to try to do is give people that content and that celebratory content that mirrors what's happening in the NBC world. Just back at Rio, from a social engagement standpoint, the top 3 performing social channels were the IOC, in the United States, IOC, you guys, and USOC. So we want to try to do the same thing in PyeongChang, and it just gets more difficult every day with Super Bowl, with NHL, with NBA, everything that's going on. That's our goal.
Brent, how do you get bigger and better with the work you guys did in Rio as you look ahead to 2018?
Oh, man. We're going to be sending more people, definitely learned that. And I guess I'm most excited for making content that would be even more in concert with people with a viewer who is watching live stream and being on your phone on Snapchat, because you kind of already are anyways when you're sitting on the couch. So making content that you'll send directly with your friend who's also watching at the same time as you. Maybe there's like a scavenger hunt, like take a photo of the TV every time something happens, and then someone would win. So that's kind of like where my brain has been going, thinking about Korea.
Yeah, and I think the other opportunity with winter versus summer is especially as we're all talking about building younger folks to become Olympic fans. Like I think we all probably have our favorite Olympic memory from years ago, but a lot of these sports are really cool. And snowboarding obviously seems to be a bit of like a hipper thing, but a lot of it too, in summer Olympic sports, you've probably tried to play basketball. You've probably been in a pool. You're definitely not as fast as Olympians, but you've seen it. I mean, skeleton is nuts. And a lot of these things, biathlon, also crazy. But these are things that I think it makes for even more storylines than we could imagine, which is just like these athletes are amazing. Also, one thing that we learned in West Hollywood was they're all incredibly attractive. They're always really cute. They have great bodies, but I don't know what it was. There's something in the water for this one. But I think we also have all these additive things from different angles. That's an opportunity for this time as well.
That was the big readout I got from everyone, is that
they
were
really
very young and
people.
attractive
Yes.
in West Hollywood. Yeah. I'm going to go down the line here. Last question before we kind of take some from the audience to start thinking, and there's some microphones, I think, on both sides here as you guys are thinking. One thing that each of you is looking forward to most as we look forward to 2018 in the next Olympic Games?
I'm looking forward to the most successful Olympic Games for Team USA in history. That's what I'm looking forward to. We've really dialed in the performance of our athletes, and the performance of our athletes, as I've said, is what makes our performance successful. So I'm looking forward to really seeing some amazing performances, whether it's in skeleton, it's going to be bobsled, ski jumping, et cetera. Some of the sports that people are getting introduced to, some key performances there and some improvements in our athlete performance. I'm looking forward to that.
That's great.
On a personal level, I think Korean culture, and especially K-pop culture, is becoming, and already has been for a while, so mainstream that it's going to be really fun to work that kind of content, especially for Snapchat and our younger audience, which is falling in love with it in the States. So that's what I'm most excited for.
I think for me, it's looking forward to the challenge. I think I say this a lot, but we are the broadcast rights holder, we're the digital streaming rights holder, but nobody really owns social media in this space. And there's a ton of competition, like with any big event, even the Oscars, Emmys, folks want to get involved in that conversation. And so it's a challenge to my team, and to Brian's point, we met that challenge for Rio, but I want to see us be able to, on the NBC Olympic side, stand out, cut through what is a very noisy period, and really have people remember the things that we did as standouts among all of the wonderful things that happen during the Olympics period.
I mean, Lindsay teed me up for this one. It's sexy athletes, it's nuts. What better words could you use to describe the introduction of mixed curling in PyeongChang Olympics? So that's what I'm looking forward to. And the only other piece that hasn't come up yet is in the NBC Sports craziness of Super Bowl followed by Olympics 4 days later. We also have the trifecta of World Cup on Telemundo shortly thereafter. So busy 2018.
So you can sleep in September. Lindsay will sleep in March. Yeah. So I want to leave. We have about 5 minutes here for some questions from the audience. I think there's mics, but we'll start right here on the front.
So I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2012 there was a big kind of drama amongst consumers about not being able to bring in large DSLRs. And by 2018 and 2020 for sure, we're going to have 5G cell service, which is 100 times faster than 4G. And our cameras and our phones are going to be so advanced that consumers are going to be able to tell amazing stories on their own. How does NBC and the Olympic Committee plan to support consumer activation, consumer telling their own story at that, as opposed to what we used to kind of do, which was no large DSLRs, no professional equipment? How are you guys going to support that from a consumer standpoint?
Well, in venue, it's an IOC controls it. So we take their lead. Because it's not a home games, and because we're not part of the organizing committee, when you get your ticket or your credential, there's specific rules that the International Olympic Committee will then give us direction as to what they want to do, whether to enforce. And we hit on it a little bit because the athletes were doing that themselves. During opening ceremony, that's where we saw the most engagement of athletes filming themselves, and we had to look at each other and on that fly, waiting for the IOC to make that decision. Do they want to support the athletes and have us promote that video, or do they want us to try to embargo it and tell our athletes, no, you can't do it? So really, it's a directive from the IOC from a Team USA standpoint.
I guess what I should ask though is, do you see that evolving, right? Because it is so compelling.
I think it will evolve when somebody wants to sponsor it. Honestly, it comes down to bucks. And if I think Samsung is one of the global partners. If Samsung and the IOC and NBC work out a deal of here's the fan angles of the day, and it helps generate some revenue, I imagine that would be the best for all parties. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. And also protecting NBC, because every piece of video that is not shot by NBC or controlled, it damages what they're trying to do. So that's the balance between generating revenue, taking care of the consumer, and taking care of NBC.
Yeah, good answer.
Here in the front too.
So the kind of fun thing between Olympics, every 2 years, every 2 years, whatever the social platform that's most popular usually changes. So even what was big in Rio will be different. So how do you guys balance your strategy for, let's say, Instagram stories now versus Snapchat?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram stories popped up like the week before the Olympics. So candidly, we did not have a strategy. There was no time to develop one. We sort of just played with it. But I mean, I think for us, reach is critical for the Olympics. When you're talking about, 200 million viewers across the games, we want to make sure we're reaching as many people as possible. And so I think we, especially in sort of the lead up to the Olympics, we've tested some smaller, platforms, whether it be emoji keyboards and things like that, that's very one-to-one. But in terms of, the broadest audience possible, a lot of that generally comes down to the biggest audience possible. And so I think we just have to evaluate how can we reach the most people on what platforms, and then also that demo is a huge one. We were very all in on Snapchat because they have accumulated a very young audience, and so it's certainly something that we look out. We're talking about it now, but generally it comes down to reach, because the size of the Olympic viewership is huge, and so we want to try to get as many people as we can on those bigger platforms.
And to tie it back to the other question too, we want that reach, and we want our content and storytelling and all the things that make us proud to the broadest audience possible, but then there's that fine line of how do you balance what you have as a commercial entity, not a charity, with a really complex ecosystem of MVPD television providers, of affiliates, of other partners, of advertisers, and to try to do that juggling act is quite delicate. So Lindsay and her team are often going to be part of whatever it is that's out there, but then to complement that, there's also hopefully a different business deal that you can negotiate with whatever social platform or new opportunity that emerges, so that you're part of it on a broader scale too.
We're short on time, and maybe one more question here, up here in the top. And I think the panelists are sticking around a bit if you guys have follow-up questions. Didn't get to
We
answer.
are?
Yes.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Can do.
Can you kind of share some of the things you guys do outside of the Olympics to keep the hype up when it's not around that time, including maybe paid if you have a strategy there?
So, one of the big things that we're trying to do again is this Summer Champion Series, which I talked about, and there are national championships happening all year long, but being able to put the Team USA brand and our horsepower behind that helps the athletes and helps the national governing bodies, and that's part of what we're supposed to do. I mean, that is our goal is to support them along with supporting NBC. So, supporting those type of events and bringing out the storylines of our athletes around these national championships and world championships is one of the ways that we do it.
For us, I mean, the Olympic Channel is a big investment for us. So I think it does allow us to be able to have a bit more of like niche storylines along the way, all throughout, the time in between. And we really lean on Team USA as well. They've aggregated an audience that really is into the Olympics year round, and we've aggregated an audience that loves the Olympics during the Olympics. And so trying to play off of each other and make sure we're sharing the content that we have. When it comes to an Olympic year though, like now, we shot a ton of content at West Hollywood, and we'll roll it out at certain strategic points. 100 days is a big milestone for us. That's November 1st. And so we really look at the countdown. So as it becomes more tangible to people, 6 months doesn't sound that as long as a year, 100 days, and we count down pretty much from there and start to roll out content along the way with different content partners that we had out at West Hollywood. So inside an Olympic year, you'll see stuff coming from us pretty much from the launch of the Olympic Channel in July all the way through to the opening ceremony.
So really great conversation. Troy, Lindsay, Brent, Brian, thank you guys very much. Thank you guys for the questions.
Thank you.